Good morning, everyone. I have a bit of a sore throat, so I'm hoping water just in case. Okay, so I always like to pivot my presentations around a question. And the question I want to address is, can we deliver a better customer experience using taxonomy? And if we can do that, how do we go about doing that as effectively as possible? So in order to answer that question, I want to just make sure we agree on some certain concepts, what they really mean. So taxonomy and ontology, metadata, alligator. Actually, I included this picture as evidence that absolutely everything exists on the internet. I have no idea what this alligator is doing, but he appears to be ringing the doorbell. So anyway, what is a taxonomy? Let's start with that. So a taxonomy is a way of organizing concepts into a hierarchy and associating with each of those concepts vocabulary, different ways of describing that concept. So in this example here, we've got inheritance tax, and that's a subcategory of tax and economics and finance. And it has some different ways of describing it, like capital transfer tax or death duties and so on. So really, taxonomies are great because, as humans, we like to organize and categorize things. And hierarchies are a really great way of finding something. So, if I want to get some garbanzo beans at the supermarket, I know to go to the tinned food section, and then to the beans section, and then to the garbanzo beans, and then I can find, the brand that I like. So it's great for that. And if, like me, you happen to come from England, then you probably call them chickpeas, and so having that in the taxonomy helps me to get there quicker. Actually, that doesn't work at the supermarket. When I moved to the US from London, the first time I went shopping, I think it took me about 5 hours to find all the things that I needed for the week. So that's a taxonomy. So what's an ontology? So ontologies are a little bit newer, but the idea here is that you can combine multiple taxonomies together into one. Why would you do that? Well, because it allows us to start creating the relationships that exist between those different things. So, for example, here we've got a particular product being described in the taxonomy. And so now we can say it has relationships to the taxonomy of capabilities and within other parts of the product taxonomy. So here we can really start to describe products and how they interact. So we can do this in a much more visual way, right? So here we have a central capability, which is enhancing search. And what we can say is that there's a number of different components that deliver that capability. And that capability delivers a number of advantages to organizations that deploy that capability, right? So we're really starting to describe all the relationships that exist within a domain, within your world. And actually, if we click on one of those links, we can navigate through. So in this case, we clicked on the bubble that said make content more findable, and now we can see all the benefits that delivers to a customer. We can see the product and product capabilities that deliver that advantage. We can see different technologies that's related to. So we're building up this picture. So this is really great, right? Because you think about it in terms of the content, these are all the components of content that you need on your website to deliver to your customers. So it's a really great way of really having a visual way of understanding the content that you need. But also this can be very powerful for your customers as a way of being able to navigate through and explore the content. And that's something that we're going to look at quite a lot more. So this is a front-end experience. Now we're leveraging the taxonomies or ontologies to enhance the user experience for customers. So on the left-hand side, we're giving ways for people to really filter down the results to the things that they're most interested in. At the top, we might promote some particular content or a product or service or promotion that we really want to get across. And on the right-hand side, we're starting to expose some of those relationships. So if you're interested in this, you probably want to know about these things as well. So what about metadata? So metadata is really the way that we should describe our content. It's the way that we make content assets really valuable and usable throughout their whole life cycle, and particularly in terms of the end user experience. So the more important a piece of content is, the more important it has the right metadata that describes what that content is, who it's for, how it can be used, and so on. And Gartner are telling us that organizations that do a really good job with metadata and taxonomy are seeing very substantial productivity gains, but also that as we go through the rest of this decade, taxonomy and metadata are going to be really fundamental to digital business and to the governance of information. So any questions so far? Is that all making sense? Hopefully yes. So I want to give some examples from our customers about how taxonomies are improving customer experience. And there's a number of different industries and use cases here. But hopefully this will give you, some ideas for how you can use these techniques yourself. So I can tell you that Amazon take taxonomy very seriously. I can also tell you that I've now got a 5-year-old baby and the weather's getting colder and he needs something warm. So I do a search and I find a coat that I like the look of. And so that's presented to me in the usual way. But you'll see at the top there, they're presenting the taxonomy. They're actually showing you how you've sort of got to that particular category within the taxonomy. So this is great because when my wife sees this coat and says, that's horrible, we need something more like a duffel coat, then she can very quickly click on the jackets and coats option and find something that's going to make my son look a bit cuter. So that's really great in terms of being able to navigate from an e-commerce perspective. But actually what Amazon's really interested in is the bit that's further up. I'm looking at a product, possibly buying a product that's in the category of baby. Now, if I just do that once, that's probably no great thing, right? But if I end up buying 2 or 3 things in the category of baby, that's very interesting. So now my Amazon homepage is no longer going to be full of cool gizmos and motorcycle gear and snowboarding stuff. It's going to be full of diapers and baby wipes and formula and stuff like that, right? So taxonomy is really powerful in terms of starting to recommend products and services to customers. So this doesn't only work for products and services, right? This works for how you recommend and personalize content. And a great example of that is Netflix, who use a very large taxonomy. So I don't remember exactly what piece of stand-up comedy I was watching, but apparently it had been tagged as irreverent, politically incorrect stand-up comedy. So now that Netflix knows that I like that stuff, it can recommend Weirdo. On a more sane note, perhaps I watched a documentary that was made in England, and now it can recommend me Wild Madagascar. So you can see this idea of, the better the content is tagged up, the more the technology can learn about your interests and what's important to you, and the more it can recommend great stuff for you. So this is another example. This is KPMG, and we heard towards the beginning of this conference about really putting the customer first and trying to put yourself into their shoes and deliver what they're interested in. And KPMG want to be seen as the experts, right? Whatever it is you want, they want to be the experts. So they've created all kinds of knowledge-based content, right? So surveys and research and thought leadership pieces, and they've put all that up for their website to create an experience where the customer can come in and say, look, I'm in the auto industry, and I want to grow my revenues, and I particularly want to grow them in the European market. So sure enough, they can show, the user can come in and say those things very easily, and then see the most relevant thought leadership and commentary that KPMG generates. So instead of this kind of this is all the stuff we do. It's much more about what are you interested in, what can we present to you that demonstrates value. And Motorola are doing very much the same thing. So, huge product categories, several thousand items in the product category. They really wanted to get away from this idea of, customer comes in, here's a huge hierarchy of products for you to navigate through. So instead, the focus is much more on, what industry are you in? What kind of solution do you need? And then to present all the relevant content describing how, for example, Motorola can help people in transportation and logistics. But of course, underpinning all of that are those, at least a subset of those thousands of products, and underpinning those products are the technologies that make those products unique. So the ontology really allows them to start with that customer first view and then to show them all the products and services that are going to really work for that particular customer situation. So the next example here is REI. In the online world, REI have faced a lot more competition now, right? There's a lot of different places that I can go to get a backpack or a fleece or something like that. So what REI is doing is really trying to promote experiences that their customers would be interested in. So quite literally, REI can take you up Mount Kilimanjaro on a hiking expedition. Incidentally, I actually did this probably about 5 years ago, and I never realized how cold and how exhausted you could be on holiday in Africa. So anyway, if you decide that one of these adventures is great for you, then guess what happens next? They use the ontology to promote all the things that you probably need to buy to go up Mount Kilimanjaro. Or equally, if you've gone and bought a paddle, then they'll show you all the adventures that involve kayaking in the Sierras or something like that, right? And then, of course, there's something else you need to buy to make that possible. So it's really trying to take this customer first view and then use that to promote the products and services. This one's gone too fast. This is a healthcare example. And this is really about how you can use taxonomies to drive user journeys. So let's imagine that I came to the site and I've conducted a search for diabetes because that's something I'm worried about, or somebody I know may have that condition. So in the middle is some snippets of content specifically about diabetes. But from here, I can actually start navigating the ontology to take a journey through. So let's say actually the thing I'm interested in is type 1 diabetes. Then I can click on that link. And so that becomes the center of the universe. And I see the content that's related to type 1 diabetes. But now I can go off and say, well, how do I stay healthy with that condition? Or what might be the symptoms? Or what treatments are available for type 1. So if I click on type 1 diabetes, and it tells me I could swap my pancreas out, which sounds a bit unpleasant. So instead I might go with the insulin option. And if I click on that, I now get to see content that's about the use of insulin for the treatment of diabetes type 1. And then if I want to go further, I can say, well, what health and care facilities are available? And it'll tell me that there's diabetes clinics, and I can put my zip code in and find the one that's nearest to me. So I've led the user through from an initial inquiry through to a successful outcome, in which was this case to consume a service provided by the NHS. Now we can also use the taxonomy to really try and understand the user's intent or query. So this is much more of a kind of natural language approach. And for those that have Apple phones and use Siri, or for those that are using Android and have the Google Assistant, if you think about what it's actually doing, if I say, what's the weather in London tomorrow, that query needs to be deconstructed, right? So firstly, weather is an information type. London is a location, and tomorrow is a date. So if I can tear those things out of the user's query, then I can get the answer to the question, right? And if it happens that there's multiple Londons or Springfields, as there are in the US, then that ambiguity can be resolved because the taxonomy knows about the different Springfields. So that allows us to really start making it very natural and easy for users to ask questions in a self-service context, right? And I think we'll see more and more of this as everyone gets used to it on their mobile devices. So whether that's I've got a problem installing a particular product on a particular environment, and so we need to know what's the operating system, what's the product you're installing, what version is it, what task were you trying to perform, or whether I'm looking for a holiday in a particular part of the world with a particular activity, Taxonomy can help me deconstruct all of that so that we can query the content and deliver the best results to the user. What we can also do more from a support perspective is to actually analyze content to see if a user's got a particular issue like that. What's the most common set of issues that look like that from our past? So in this particular case, someone's driven in with a Honda Accord 2.5 litre, and it won't start. Well, they probably haven't driven in with it then, they've probably been towed in, but you get the point. So what we can do here is actually query all of the support tickets or engineering reports for that text and use the taxonomy to identify that symptom and that car, what's the most common thing that causes that problem. And it turns out that it's a power control module in 8 out of sort of 16 or so cases. And so if I click on that, I can see all the times that's happened before and how it was resolved. And I can also see the most appropriate technical manual for changing the PCM within a particular make, model and year of vehicle. So we can start to use the taxonomy from an analytics perspective to actually start recommending solutions to problems to support a self-serve paradigm. This is another example in support. This is Autodesk. And what I'd also like you to do is start thinking of taxonomy as a kind of glue that can bring things together. And what Autodesk realized is actually their customers are generating more content about their products than Autodesk does themselves, right? And so what they wanted to do is take advantage of that, bring all these different internal and external data sources together in order to solve problems for customers. So they aggregated all this data in, including things like YouTube and wikis and discussion boards and so on. And then the key is that they can apply consistent metadata across all of those different information sources. So what was the product being used, what versions, what families, what components, which features and capabilities or APIs is the customer trying to use, what use case do they have, what are they trying to resolve. So by creating consistent metadata across all of that content from all of the different places, they can then deliver that up to a user's query within the product, through the website, and through mobile channels as well. So what you can't see here from that sprawl of data is that they actually had 14 people run 45 different types of query to find the most relevant solution to a problem, and compared that to a traditional Google type search for resolving that same problem. And all 14 of the experts who did this test preferred the solution that applied the taxonomy and the metadata to deliver the right answer to a support type question. Right? It's a pretty comprehensive result. So hopefully through those examples we've seen that taxonomies can help us with e-commerce. They can help us to deliver a much more personalized experience. They can really help us to promote knowledge to our customers, that we can drive user journeys that have successful outcomes, and that we can help to automate and improve customer support and deflect support tickets. So I'd like you to think very much as taxonomy as a kind of a bridge, right? As organizations, we tend to think in terms of products and services, but actually our customers have problems and they're looking for solutions to those problems. Equally, the company has lots of different and disparate sources of information that are put out to customers from marketing and technical publications and so on. But the customer just wants a joined up experience, right? They just want to look for a product and everything is there in one place seamlessly. And equally, from a company perspective, there's lots of technical lingo. Is TMS translation management system. Well, to us, it's taxonomy management system, of course. So really just helping the customer use their language to get to the information that they're looking for. Okay, so how do we go about implementing taxonomy? The first place to start, really, we see customers who have just sort of gone out and decided taxonomy is important, so they just think, what's everything we do? We'll put that all into a taxonomy and that will be great. We would advocate the opposite approach, which is to start with your customers. What are they searching for? What are they navigating? What matters to them? What does their world look like? And if you start with that, that really tells you what are the key facets by which you need to be able to describe your content. So actually we're thinking first about the metadata and not the taxonomy. How will users want to query the content or navigate the content to get the information that they really need quickly? And if you start with that, it defines the facets. In turn, that defines the metadata schema. And that gives you what would be the top levels of your taxonomy or ontology, the branches, in our lingo, the concept schemes. So once you've got those concept schemes defined, the next thing really is to try and reuse and repurpose as much as possible. So actually you'll probably be surprised how much stuff you've already got. Hierarchies, vocabularies, taxonomies, lists, reference data, product catalogs, all these things can be imported in to help you build an ontology as quickly and efficiently as possible. But there's also a lot of stuff in the public domain, right? So even Google makes a lot of its ontologies available publicly. You can use those. There's all kinds of information from analysis of Wikipedia. There's all kinds of places you can go to help you start populating these branches of the ontology as quickly as possible. And then once you've done that, you can also mine the content, right? So you can take samples of your own content, use natural language processing to mine all of that content, and that will suggest the concepts, the vocabulary, the relationships that might belong in your ontology. So that really helps with the automation as well. And then if you have different systems, perhaps marketing has a system and tech pubs has a system that describe products, but you need to bring those two taxonomies together, then you can use mapping tools to help you to heavily assist that process, so you end up with a kind of Uber ontology that has a harmonized set of vocabulary. And then last, once you've done all of that work to build out the ontology, you can start to engage your subject matter experts. So give them a really simple interface so they can review the ontology, they can make suggestions, add things in, and help you to make sure that it's ready for live. Now the metadata, you've got two options here. You can populate the metadata manually. We'd rather you did that in an automated fashion instead, right? Because firstly, it's a big burden to ask your end users to tag up content manually. Secondly, if you give the same content to 5 different people, you'll get 5 different sets of tags, right? So you have no consistency. The other thing is that over time, you'll want to change your taxonomies. And if your taxonomies change, you don't want to have to go back to all those users and say, do you mind going back and re-tagging all of that content you tagged before? So if you can do this in an automated fashion, then every time you change your taxonomy, you can just press a button and reclassify the content. Next slide. Go on. I know, it's going to jump about 10 slides now. It's like the lift button, right? The faster you press it, the faster the lift goes. Yes, okay. So the other thing, if you can automate the classification of your content, is it can give you really great analytics about the actual content that you have. Right, so on the left-hand side, we're taking a look at topics that have an awful lot of content. So the top topic here has 342 different documents. Now that might tell us that we've got a lot of redundant content. Do we really need that much content about one topic? Can we prune that back and reduce our maintenance? Or it might tell us that we need to break that topic down into more granular topics so that when users navigate through the site or search, they get a small set of results that's really relevant rather than a big bucket of stuff, most of which is of no interest. But equally, you can go the other way and say, well, what are the topics for which we have no content or almost no content? And that might tell us that those parts of the taxonomy are redundant because nobody cares about them. Or it might tell us that we really need to beef up our content in that area, right? So really useful analytics to help you hone in the content that you've got to the stuff that's really important and nothing else. So just to finish up, I actually stole this slide from HP, who presented last year, and talked about how they were using taxonomy to bring a more unified experience to their website. So I thought I would just use this to sum up, really, that it's really helped them to generate much more relevant content and to really generate a better experience through that content, to be able to crowdsource information much better, to deliver better search, and to make the content management process much more efficient as well. And they see that as a virtuous cycle, right? They can keep doing those things and continuously getting better and better in terms of the web experience that they provide to their customers. So how does this all integrate to SDL, and how does this lead back to the content? And to answer that, I'm going to hand over to Chip.
Thank you, Toby. So Toby will be back shortly for questions, and I really wanted to do a few brief slides on taxonomy as it relates to Knowledge Center customers. I'm looking at several of you in the audience and have had conversations with you on this subject, along with Sarah Polowick on my team, and Frank Lissette and Dave DeMeyer last year demonstrated this on stage. And as Greg indicated, tomorrow morning, Frank and Dave will be back, and they're going to do a demo of some of these things, so we'll be able to see some live aspects of what we're talking about. And Toby, thank you. I really appreciate your insights of what other industries are doing. One of the things SDL's really focused on our product roadmap is to make our product content, the user guides, reference manuals, help files, all that information more consumer friendly, more like a consumer website, on looking at kids' parkas and whatever else is relevant to me. And again, many of you, I'm looking at you, Gerald, but we've had conversations about how do we present that in a more reasonable fashion. So one quick thought, is Martha Larson here? There you are. Okay, I'm gonna let you do your announcement, you and Rick, at the end of this about what you guys are doing in the user group. So when we start looking at the integration with an external taxonomy system, again, this was announced last year, and what SDL has provided, starting with Knowledge Center 2016, are APIs to integrate with an external system. For us longtime users that have used TriSoft, Live Content Architect, now Knowledge Center, we all know the metadata, the list of values is flat, right? It's one level. So we don't have that capability of doing hierarchical metadata. Our solution for that was to integrate with industry standards and industry methods to share taxonomies within your organization. What Frank and team has heard from a number of our customers is many of you have taxonomies within your company, and you want to become a part of that ecosystem. So that is our strategy and approach with the taxonomy integration. And so in a technical sense, what happens here is that today out of the box, we've integrated in with Smartlogic Semaphore through what's called now Content Manager, Live Content Architect. So what that means is that we have the ability to have metadata or taxonomy values from an external system appear inside the properties dialogues of topics, maps, images, publications. Any place you have a properties dialog or a column within your CMS, with the browse dialog and so forth. Those now will appear from an external taxonomy system. And so our APIs have been written to do that. And again, those of you who were here last year saw Dave do a real-time connection from California with a server based in Belgium. So this is a real-time update and integration. Toby, you said something real important. Taxonomies change frequently. So within your organization, you have the capability of letting someone else perhaps maintain it. And then this connection is live, so that if you make a change in the external taxonomy, it's automatically reflected within Knowledge Center. Because what we're doing is we're associating that metadata values as links back to the source, not copying and putting it into our repository. So if your product names change, like Tara talked about this morning, or other changes to your taxonomy, it will get reflected automatically. Now what we're working on, so that's out of the box today. Finally, you may have a different taxonomy system in use within your organization today. So SDL has provided these APIs, and already we have some customers doing reference deployments. Healthwise did some work. A couple of other customers are doing work. And so this we see as a very strong growth area. So what's coming, and this will be what Frank talks about tomorrow with the product roadmap, is integration in with the content delivery, or reach. So our next generation content delivery, the data platform, will have integrations with taxonomy, and that's how we can drive consumer-related type deliverables for this content. And we can do it today through our professional services team, but over the next year, year and a half, we're going to make this more out of the box on the delivery side as well. So what does this mean from, again, from a content manager position, a live content architect user? So what you see here, and I've been here 8.5 years and I waited for this, is hierarchical metadata within the dialogues of live content, or I'm sorry, with Knowledge Center. And we all do it. So on the top one is, I've got continents, countries, and cities. So the idea being is that if I look at Europe, the next field countries, the only countries I would see would, of course, be for Europe. Now, I'm looking at Charlie. No, I'm kidding you. But Charlie, with list of values, it was flat. You couldn't say Europe, okay. So this first thing that we do is provide that hierarchical. The second thing we've done in this second dialogue down here is type ahead. There's a lot of countries in Europe. Okay, we won't get into politics, but there's a lot of countries within Europe. And the idea is that I could type countries or letters, and then I see, for example, 3 or 4 examples, and a user can select them. So that's new also within our dialogues. And then finally, there is a drop-down list that you can see on the right-hand side. And again, these values are coming from the external taxonomy system. So as countries change, again, or as your products change and so forth, these values get reflected in real time. Not when you exit and start the application again, but the next time I actually pop down that menu and so forth. So what are some of the best practices that SDL is seeing evolving? And then we'll take some questions for Toby and I, and also Martha can make a short announcement. What we're seeing is a move to externalizing taxonomy management. And the reason why is that an example Toby had is that we're never going to really get rid of the content silos in our organizations. We're going to have video systems. We're going to have learning management systems, maybe knowledge bases, text, documentation, whatever. You align the taxonomy across those systems, which can help provide customers with more consistent search or navigation results. So having that external kind of management capabilities is key, and having that moving forward in the future. The second thing is collaboration within your organization. Many of you in the room have adopted DITA as your content standard. And like DITA, the taxonomy industry has a number of standards. And oh boy, find a taxonomy expert, and that's a really riveting conversation. I'm kidding, any of you have librarian friends. But there's passionate about taxonomies as we are about concepts versus tasks versus references. So it's a very strong, well-established industry, especially for those of you in medical fields, product fields. There's very rich taxonomies available to work on and to provide. One of the things I learned, and I didn't want to make this a product presentation, but one of the things I've learned from our customers is you can filter a taxonomy for a variety of uses. So for example, your taxonomy that you have, maybe some of you are manufacturers or have SKUs and all these kind of lists of products and so forth. It's possible to filter those values so that your, for example, knowledge center users see a subset of it, and perhaps your knowledge base users using Oracle right now, or they might be using Salesforce, see a slightly different view of the same taxonomy. So not unlike data specializations in our industry, why do I have to burden everyone with tags or metadata they're not going to use? And that's a really big part of the metadata filtering that I'm seeing. The other thing that Toby brought up is learning about user behaviors. And obviously, we all use the internet for finding or navigating content. And the more Amazon or Google knows about me, the weirder it gets sometimes. Like my videos, I can't show here. No, it's like my Netflix, I love foreign films. And I was like, okay, I don't want to just see French today. But anyways, that's another story. But the idea is that user behaviors can drive how we present our help systems, our documentation. Toby mentioned Scott Wolf from HP, and there is a recording, by the way, on the SDL.com of a webinar that I did with Scott a year ago. And Scott talks a lot about discovery and finding that for troubleshooting content. So many of you have hardware or software troubleshooting techniques. Anyone using the DITA troubleshooting topic, by the way, yet? There's a few of you. Yeah, it's pretty cool. So imagine having the troubleshooting topic have logic behind it to say, did this work, yes or no? Now, instead of a traditional DITA map guiding me along, it could be a taxonomy that suggests or promotes certain topics for me to resolve that particular printer jam. Or perhaps I'm trying to maintenance a device or do an upgrade or something and so forth. There also is the ability to minimize your taxonomy. And again, if you really get into deep taxonomies and medical, they can be tens of thousands of items within that. So don't worry about it. You can, and Bob, you're nodding your head. How large are your taxonomies in EBSCO?
We use standard medical taxonomies, and they're huge.
Yeah.
I don't even know the scale of them.
That's huge. You don't know how big it is. Okay, that's big enough. So, but there's the abilities to filter that or bring it down as needed and so forth. The last thing I want to bring up, and then Martha, I'd love for you to talk about the subcommittee that's come up, and maybe, Greg, you got the microphone, is that we're moving into an era where topic-based authoring, the relationships of the delivery are dynamic. Brought up the troubleshooting topic already. What this means is moving away from just DITA maps to drive our content delivery and move into one area that we can have user patterns deliver out content. Or perhaps the contextual aspects of your application can drive which topics are relevant for the user. Many of us do this today with contextual help. We've had that for years. If I'm on a certain screen in the software and I hit help, oh, there comes up the topic. But imagine if it's richer than that it's actually tracking user behaviors. It understands I'm an advanced user or a beginning user or so forth. These are aspects that you can start tracking and managing about your customers, not unlike we saw with consumer type websites and so forth. So last slide is the documentation portal. The SDL, there's a whole reference documentation about binding a metadata field, and it's on the docs.sdl.com. And I also meant to mention a book and a white paper that Val Swisher from Content Rules has written. She's speaking here. Val has written this great white paper about the differences between taxonomy and terminology, which all of you are thinking about. And that's a great conversation to have with Val. But there is very philosophical differences, and there are crossovers between them. Whoops, I knew I was going to kick your water bottle over. So the last thing I want to leave you with, and then Martha, I'd love to hear from you, is the fact that a taxonomy can take on a global nature in itself as well. So what that means is that you may have different behaviors for your customers in Germany versus Japan versus North America. A taxonomy can drive those behaviors or those tracking, where terminology can talk to the fact if it's British English, American English, Australian English, or is it power chord, or is it three-prong, that's terminology and so forth. So, but Martha, I want to put you on the spot because it's almost lunchtime, but Martha, why don't you introduce yourself and talk about the taxonomy work the user group's coming up with?
Sure. Well, I'd actually like to make 2 plugs. So, hi everyone, I'm Martha Larson. I'm with Thermo Fisher Scientific. We've been customers of Knowledge Center for about 5 years now. And so one thing I wanted to let you know, if you are current Knowledge Center customers and you don't already participate in our monthly user group, I would really encourage you to join. It's run by Elizabeth Geschwin from FICO, who was very sorry she couldn't be here this week. But if you'd like to join, you can come up and see me or contact Chip, and we can pass your information along to Elizabeth. And we meet monthly. We have a 1-hour conference call, and Elizabeth puts together an agenda of great topics. We talk about best practices, tips, share information, and it's really useful to participate. And we also have a few subcommittees, and a fairly new one that we have is a taxonomy subcommittee that meets separately about once a month. And we are meeting to talk about developing taxonomy, managing that taxonomy, and how we might integrate those with Knowledge Center. And so we're sharing our experience and also looking to bring in some speakers who have even more experience to share their information with us. And if you're interested in joining that group, please contact me. And that group's also meeting for lunch today, so if you're interested in having lunch with us, I'm going to just stand up front after the session and we can meet up there.
Great, Martha. Thank you. And thank you for your contribution. You and Rick Timkovich from Dell EMC, you both have been very helpful in the user group, so thank you. So let's take some questions. Toby, come back up, and not that we're before lunch, but we are. But anyways, let's, any questions from the audience? Josh.
You were saying, I was looking at that one slide. Looking at the one slide with the filter, and then you apply taxonomy to all these different things. And you mentioned customer created content. How do you apply that metadata to somebody else that owns that content and have it come back to the customer when they search on it?
Yeah, so that's, I think that was the Autodesk example where they were bringing content in from their user base. So they, actually some of the content they bring in centrally, some of it they leave in place. And either way, they crawl all of the content, and they use natural language processing over that content to look within the actual text of the content and identify, the products and versions mentioned, the capabilities, what the user's trying to do. So they've built obviously they have a taxonomy of their products, but they've also built a taxonomy of all the different use cases that, someone's trying to architect a particular type of thing with their product, or they actually, I never knew this, but Autodesk generate a lot of the libraries that are used for all those games. So you know those kind of shoot them up games where you wander around buildings? That's all Autodesk underneath the scenes. So sometimes they're gamers trying to develop some kind of new game using their APIs. So the natural language processing analyzes all the content and generates the metadata, and that metadata is consistent whether it's their own technical documentation that they've developed or something that's come from, you know, a user saying, yeah, this is how I solved a particular problem using the product. So there's now a central index. I think they use Solar, which actually points to every piece of content, internal or external, has that consistent metadata in it, and then that's queried within the products, within the help websites, within the mobile channels.
One of the things we're looking at the next release of Knowledge Center, Toby mentioned an auto classification capability. We don't support that today with Knowledge Center 2016, meaning the Smartlogic crawlers can't go into the architect repository and crawl the repository. One option we're looking at is developing a plugin with Authoring Bridge or Content Editor ex Opus, is that on check-in, user types a topic. On check-in, the crawler could then look at the content and create the metadata. One of our partners, Oberon, is looking at even building that now for some of their customers, and we're looking at in the future in the roadmap. But today with Knowledge Center, we manually go into the properties and apply them and click OK. Question? Yes.
This is Young Choi, Twiddle Group in Michigan. We're creating a bunch of technical publication for auto industry. Currently, our content has an index term for searching capability. I'm trying to understand where taxonomy data will be stored in the metadata or content itself, like index term. I'm not clear that part. Would you explain for that?
I could
Do you want to take that one?
Yeah. And I won't technically describe it, but if you look at, we use, within the DITA standard, there's the ability to put index terms typically within the prologue. And that is used by a full text search to help weight results from the search. Most of our customers have had mixed results with the index, you know, the index tagging like that, because it's fairly flat. When we look at a taxonomy, the big difference is the metadata is attached to that object externally. And the second thing is that taxonomy, that metadata, can have relationships, and it can be a one-to-many relationship. And I don't know if you want to pick up, but that, you know, search terms are one-to-one, where taxonomy has a one-to-many relations, right?
Right. So when we apply metadata to content, we never put in the name of the concept. Instead, we put in a GUID or a URI, and that in turn points back to that particular concept within the ontology. And there in the ontology is its preferred term, but in each of the different languages as well. So if you're delivering through different languages, you can look up the appropriate preferred term. And then also within there are all the relationships. So when you saw that screen with, you know, Apollo 11, that was related to Buzz Aldrin because he, you know, was the astronaut for that mission. That was looked up dynamically against the ontology at the time the screen was rendered. So store the URI or the GUID against the content item, and then from there, everything else can be retrieved dynamically from the ontology.
It's not unlike, and Toby, you mentioned about GUIDs. A taxonomy system will use GUIDs much like we do inside our repository. And we all know the benefits of that, of doing versus doing hard cross-references and file paths and so forth. So it's a similar kind of pattern. I think the last thing I'll say is that taxonomies allow you to, I'm going to say, grow over time to have more richness to the search, the results that are being shown to your customers. In HP's example, the troubleshooting, they have a middleware piece of software that actually tracks how long it took Greg, for example, to resolve that troubleshooting item. And it was the 5th topic that he read. Well, the next time Toby comes in with a similar problem, well, why don't we just put Greg's topic as the number 1 or number 2?
Right.
So the idea is, and this goes back to your machine learning, and now those are great statistics. You know, it's like we're not going to have humans doing this, it's machine learning now. So that we'll be able to have better prediction of which topics to present to our customer based on past results.
All right, round of applause for our guests.